Hey, Miguel Dorati back here on the CRP, and Snake Eyes is still aboard. A lot of patience there. Took a little potty break, so I apologize for the delay. We are back with part two of our conversation on Game Changer Wrestling. The company was in Chicago the day before the All Elite Wrestling pay per view this past weekend, and that's a great day to run a show. Obviously, it was a little bit of wrestling paparazzi at the Game Changer Wrestling. A lot of people not fighting that were to be seen in the crowd and stuff. And then actually their card was packed with a lot of surprises. And it's at the point where in the indie scenes, like the indies are so robust at this point that you get shows like Game Changer Wrestling that have been around since, like, if I'm not mistaken, from their website, is since like around 2006. It gives them almost 15 years of history now. They've had a chance to develop their own style and the way of doing things and things like that. So they're not, they may be small, they may be indie, they may be a little bit more rough around the edges and stuff like that, but they are no longer just like a fly-by-night company going out there, setting up a ring and not knowing what the hell they're doing. They got guys on roster, guys, repeat offenders, so to speak, that appear on their shows and things. And, now that we're delving into this scene, a lot of those names will be familiar to us. With all that said, we're going to continue going down the card. And the next match, this is just bizarre to me. I mean, I just, this is one of those things about pro wrestling that I don't get, and I get the whole gamut of things from like very serious, like technique oriented to the violence aspect of it, to the camp aspect, have some fun with it and stuff like that. But what I don't get is the geriatric league. And the next match actually had Jerry the King Lawler, WWE commentator, in the ring against veteran Mance Warner. I guess Warner known on the indie scene, but I'll have you fill us in on Mance Warner first. Give us a little bit of his resume, and then talk about the King, because the King, the King had a heart attack announcing. If announcing is too strenuous for you, you shouldn't be in the ring anymore.
Yeah, when I saw his name on the flyer, I actually didn't think he was gonna wrestle, first off. And then when I walked through the door, he was sitting at his merch booth. It was $20 an autograph or $20 for a picture, and he was wearing a WWE shirt. Needless to say, I don't think anybody bought anything from him at that show, regardless of the fact. So Mance Warner's a badass redneck who just beats the hell out of anybody and everybody he sees. So that's basically his gimmick, okay? So we have that against Jerry the King Lawler. So he came out, he kind of talked shit about Chicago for a couple of
Is
minutes.
Mance an older guy, a younger guy? Like how does that look? Does it look like like a boy beating up a geriatric, or like what's the matchmaker doing on that end?
He, he
I'm
seems
curious.
he seems like he's in about his probably lower 30s, I would assume. I mean, he's got a
All right,
grizzled look to him. I mean, he doesn't look like a young kid. But
but
they
younger 30s, he's still half the king's age, half his age.
true, very true on that aspect.
That should rule out the match. That should be like, nah, I can't. We can't do this. No, sorry. So, but
Well,
and I continue. And I know with all due respect, the King's a legend. I mean, if you go back 30 years, you're talking about a guy who was at the peak of the sport. And what he did for his region, you know, is he took that Mid South region of wrestling and made it the premier league in wrestling while he was at the top. Everybody wanted to know what was going on with those feuds and Hangman Bobby Jaggers and the whole thing and stuff like that. So we're talking about a bona fide legend in my book, with all due respect. Now, as a commentator, he's been with the WWE a long time. And I don't know that his commentating talent warrants the length of run he's been on. You know what I mean? It's been the kind of thing where it's like he's not an elite announcer in my book. He's okay. And he has a lot of history, but he's got a lot of history and stories that he doesn't say. It doesn't come up often enough in his broadcast in my book. So, but he's on the WWE contract. So we'll talk about that first. Like, does he have to he's got to have the big company's permission to do this, doesn't he? Like, how does that work, do you think?
well, and it's funny you say that because like I get a company like the New England Wrestling or whatever that's over on the East Coast. they normally have a couple of WWE guys that are on their show every single show. But I don't see them being okay with a death match show. But at the same time, the only time I see Jerry Lawler on WWE nowadays is the pre-shows before pay-per-views. So maybe he's just on a limited thing where he can take his own indie bookings. I mean, I'm not too sure. I mean, well, it is Ric Flair's daughter's son, or Ric Flair's son-in-law, Conrad Thompson, that runs, the Starcast and stuff. So maybe he had some pull in it too. I'm not really sure how all that works. But regardless to say, I got to see Jerry Lawler brawl all around the ring with Mance Warner. I mean, they were brawling in the crowd. I mean, to the light post. I mean, all over the place. And Jerry Lawler put this man through a table. He put him through a table with a pile driver,
Oh,
nonetheless.
his
Finished.
signature move.
And he got the victory at a deathmatch wrestling show. And that's actually where they kind of it was a good transition into the hardcore by starting small with something as Jerry Lawler giving his finisher through a table. I mean, it was a good way to break the hardcore mold.
Yep. It's interesting. The touches that you got to put there, you got to know your card, you know what I mean? And you got to know your audience and where to feature things. And to me, it's interesting. I noticed it right away that, I don't think there's any doubt that Jerry Lawler is the biggest name anywhere near this card, but he's not at the top of the card. You know what I mean? He didn't get top billing, and that I think is correct. I think that's the right thing. I think you bring him in. If you put some extra seats in there, that's what you bring him in for. Hey, you're going to get a match out of him and stuff, so that's awesome. But then you go on and you do your other thing. You don't. They didn't build their whole show around it, and I think that shows, their legs and some chops too. They put him in there because if you're a smaller show, I think they get a guy like that, and it's like. You got a poster, and it's like, who's big on the indie circuit? Mankind, for example. Mankind's gonna do autographs, and he's the whole poster, and then the guys fighting have like a little corner on it. You know what I mean? So it's like I'm glad that they not put Lawler in his place, but that they didn't give him front bill. You know what I mean? It would be inappropriate, and from what you're telling me in terms of the audience, it would be that they don't know their friggin' audience because he didn't get over, huh?
Well, he was heavily booed. I mean, he was cheered when he came out, but then he started talking about how GCW reminded him of extremely crappy wrestling back in the day, and that set the crowd off. So, needless to say, when he won, the crowd actually didn't really respond because they weren't expecting that.
Yeah, it's funny. He just seems out of place, like a guy who showed up in a time machine or something. Because I think the fact is with this hardcore stuff's probably obviously been going on for a long time and is a niche that's out there. But with the internet and stuff like that, it definitely has a very 21st century feel to it. You know what I mean? And Jerry Lawler's run was in the 20th century. I think that says it all. So from there, they did transition into the hardcore stuff. And now here, let's pause on this, not only because it's the first of the hardcore stuff, but also there was an injury out there that I want you to update us on because, no matter what we're talking about in any of this sports or sport-related stuff around combat, such as pro wrestling and stuff, injuries have to be front and foremost in our considerations and stuff. So take us through this. This isn't tables, ladders, and chairs. They skipped the tables and they put doors in there. So now you get doors, ladders, and chairs. And this was, what is this? It says Tony Deppen, Alex Zane, Blake Christian, G-Raver, Jimmy Lloyd, and Kobe Durst. Logan Stunt and Matthew Justice, Shamer. Was this like a free for all, like 8 men all at once, or describe this back there? Help me out here.
Well, originally, there was only 6 people advertised for the match, and then all of a sudden, the ring was just full of people. Now, Logan Stunt, that last name might sound familiar because that's Marco Stunt's brother. So, fun fact on
Oh, interesting. Okay. Is
Jimmy
he
Lloyd.
short too?
Yes, he is. He just has facial hair. Just picture Marco Stunt with facial hair. And he's probably a little bit more toned out too. He was actually thrown by Shane Mercer into like the 10th row from the middle of the ring. It was the coolest thing I've ever seen. I actually snapped a selfie with Logan after that match. I was like, dude, that shit was intense, bro. But anyway, as you mentioned before, there was an injury. G-Raver. Now, this is my first GCW show. I never heard of G-Raver, so I'm not doing this because I'm his homeboy or nothing. I'm just doing this because, I'm a wrestling fan and it
It's the
kind of
right thing
sucks.
to do. It's the right thing to do.
Right. So G-Raver he was supposed to take a brain buster off the top of a ladder through some light tubes that were in the middle. Unfortunately, his foot was on the kind of the stop where like you put the paint can, where you're not supposed to put your foot. And when he tried to push off, it broke, and he got no upward leverage for Jimmy Lloyd. And unfortunately, his arm got caught on the tubes in the corner of the ladder, and he got spliced open pretty well. He doesn't have a lot of feeling in his hand and his arm. He's not able to do his day job, so he is doing a GoFundMe to help him out for the surgery. I mean, he's almost at his goal. He's at 7,300 out of 10 grand. I mean, that's pretty cool for in a couple of days that the deathmatch community can come together like that, and I've seen people over in Japan be donating. So that's
Yeah, I
that's
think
completely
more hats out. Just in terms of perspective, from what I know, medical work and the type of medical care that he may be looking at here is at some point, in all likelihood, going to exceed his very modest GoFundMe request. So I just want to point out there that this gentleman, he's not out there trying to grab money on GoFundMe or inflate a cost there. 10 grand is very modest for what he is likely facing here in terms of medical care. And that's, a shame to hear, on the big show on WWE from the likes of Ryback and many other former stars that have come forward. I mean, they're independent contractors, right? So if they have medical insurance, they're paying for it on the side. They get no help from the WWE. Now, granted, the WWE may have their chosen few that, he needs a surgery, they cover it or whatever. But for what they're obligated to do based on contract, they're not. Now, they're the elite. So now what's the situation here with GCW? These guys got in the ring. Maybe they have a one-day insurance policy, but basically they're on their own medical insurance. Is that probably the case?
I would assume. And I know he's also a tattoo artist, so with him not able to move with one of his hands, he's not able to work his day job. So he, as we mentioned, he does have a GoFundMe. It's gofundme.com/graver-surgery, or you can find him on Facebook. I know he posted an update video earlier today saying, he's selling some other t-shirts and memorabilia and stuff that he has, to try to help fund, the funds that he's missing by not being able to work and not being able to wrestle.
I mean, and that's the dark side of all the combat sports. When I include my background in MMA and boxing and stuff like that, we see this, and unfortunately, when an injury occurs like that, people are left, asking for help. And like I said, in this situation with 10K being requested for what he's facing, he's not grabbing money or asking for an excessive amount there. And I think that bears noticing, because he's going to be going through this trial probably alone on his, and if he seems to be self-employed from what you're mentioning to me, just at a high level. So, hopefully he's been up to date on his insurance and stuff. But, this is that part of wrestling that unfortunately things get very real. So, I mean, if you've got an extra couple of bucks in your pocket, this is a good cause. You can help a guy out who hurt himself, try to put on a show there, and that's a good cause. If you can skip, you know, uh, you know, one drink or the next time you go out or a couple of beers or whatever and donate $5, it adds up, and it's been adding up. So the community has showed itself to be strong again here. In just a couple of days, they've got several $7,000 out of 10 raised. I've seen, for example, MMA fighter Mark Kerr, who maybe one day, once upon a time was the number one pound for pound fighter on the planet, has a GoFundMe page that has been at $500 or $5,500 rather, and stuck for months and months and months. So there's a part where the community has left out a guy. Here they seem to be reacting to G-Raver. So anyway, if you can, continue to do so. It's important. Uh, what else? Anything else about that match? So tell me what goes on with the doors. Do the doors actually have like the is there like locks on the doors, or is it like the door with the hole on it? Like what's going on
Well, when I first showed up to the arena, all the doors were stacked up against the back wall, so I knew some shit was about to go down.
there?
No, there wasn't any handles or locks on it, but they would put them on chairs and set them up as tables or lay them in the corner. There was a really insane spot where they were kind of fighting on a balcony. I can't remember who was up there, but he threw the one guy off, and then he looked up, and it was kind of that pitched roof with the big metal bars that have the handles on each side. He
uh,
hopped up there and he kind of monkey barred his way over, and dude had to be about a good 15, 20 feet in the air, man. And he dropped down on everybody. And there was a spot when I was smoking a cigarette watching through the door, and Mercer had I can't remember who he had above his head, but another guy threw a chair, I mean, directly at Mercer's ribs. I mean, full force. And dude got press slammed on a ladder that was on the rope and balancing on the other ladder. And I mean, these guys went through hell for that 20 minutes. And the sad part is a lot of the fans went outside to smoke a cigarette and didn't see it. I was at least sitting there in the doorway, still watching this match. It's just, I think a lot of the fans didn't recognize the names, maybe. I mean, there was a lot of, AEW fans there checking out GCW for the first time, so maybe that wasn't their cup of tea or whatever, but I thought that match was absolutely insane, and I really do hope a speedy recovery for G-Raver, man. That from one wrestler to another, that's shitty, man. I once had a piece of glass go through my hand in a death match and cut the tendon to my middle finger. So my middle finger was stuck like this my senior year of high school. So I took advantage of that. But yeah, that alone was 20 grand, with the physical therapy and everything, and I still can't straighten my finger all the way. So
Yeah, yeah. But now, talk to me. What now? You mentioned Logan Stunt is Marco Stunt's brother. So his brother is obviously the AEW uh, third member of the Luchasaurus team there, and we could talk about him on a future AEW broadcast. And he's taken up some of our time already, and looks like they've signed him. So more power to him. Now, is his brother following in his footsteps? Or is his brother going to be a situation where his brother remains in the Indies and Marco gets there? Like is there a future in the tech? Like if he's so small, how does he work into this match? Was this like were there any giants in this match? Like what did this look like?
Shane Mercer is a massive human being. That dude is ripped. That guy is shredded. He was probably the biggest guy in the match, other than Jimmy Lloyd, but Jimmy Lloyd's more of the stocky, chunky type dude. Um, but yeah, he was more or less just kind of climbing on guys. He climbed on dude's shoulders and got up on the ladder and all that. But once Shane Mercer threw him 10 rows deep into the crowd, that was it for him. He got carried out like he was Jesus on the cross. I mean, he was gone. He went to the back. And
Okay, I mean, but that's a powerful thing, and I like him and his brother both take some serious bumps, and they kind of have to because even if you said like a massive guy, he should be able to throw a 200 pounder, right? So now throw a guy who's literally 100 pounds. It's nothing. It's like throwing a woman. You know what I mean? So they fly around there and they do take some serious bumps. So more power to him. And now that his brother's on AEW, the book's out in my book. I think at some point I'm going to ask him to prove himself as a wrestler as well as with the gimmicks and stuff like that. But maybe he's got some chops and he can do that. He seems to be very down to earth now that he's becoming a little bit better known and doing interviews and stuff like that. So more power to him. If his brother comes up and helps the character and helps extend the run for him and can provide quality wrestling, then excuse me, I got the hiccups here. But then more power to him. Logan Stunt, Marco Stunt's brother there at the doors, ladders, and chairs match. Now, continuing here, Gary J defeats Warhorse, and now we're getting into these matches here are the the bread and butter and the main fights on the card. So what was Jay versus Warhorse like?
That was a stiffathon. I mean,
Ooh.
that was nothing but forearms and kicks and chops. Legitimately, I mean, they beat the piss out of each other. And since I knew Orange Cassidy was coming up next, I had to go and finish my cigarette in the parking lot. So this is where I kind of left a little bit in the parking lot to catch some air. I mean, just some fresh air because I knew the main event was going to be filled with light tubes, so I wanted to prepare my chest for that first off. So I didn't catch the ending of this. I did know that Gary J won. I did hear his theme music hit, so that's when I knew it was time to get back in for the next match for sure.
Now, was there blood?
No, no blood.
Okay, so just stiff work, and I think that's good too. And I think that gives me hope for AEW delving into this market and reaching in for people, and it gives you an idea of if you can get through these cards, then if guys like Jimmy Havoc and Joey Janela are going to have to do work where they're not bloody every week. I think that's the right way to portray the sport kind of thing, the quote unquote sport, but at the end of the day, they want to go more towards the competitiveness, wins count kind of thing and stuff like that. So I think that's all important there. And I think it's important that, you have some of the extreme athletes that, do the crazy stuff, that you could also intermix it with, a match like this that isn't out of place. It's like, as you said, it's a stiffathon, which means the guys are really, putting their oomph into it, but not blood, not have blood into it. And I think that helps with some of the mainstream audience. Now, next, unfortunately, Gangrel, to me, I missed him, when he had his run with the big companies, but he's obviously a big name or a known name, as you pointed out, one of the vampires, or I'll let you describe it further. And he takes on quickly becoming a legend, and that's Orange Cassidy. Talk about this. And I got questions here too. So, but go ahead, talk about it because I see you can't stop smiling.
Dude, I was looking forward to this match. Okay, so about 3 years back, we brought in Kevin Thorne and Gangrel to wrestle in my hometown at a show I was on, and Gangrel and Kevin Thorne both gave me praise on my high flying skills for being such a small guy. So that's like one thing I'll always take with me. So anytime Gangrel is on a show in Wisconsin, I have to go. I mean, it's just too cool. But obviously Orange Cassidy, one of my favorite wrestlers right now in the indie scene and AEW. And I actually was in the entranceway, so I'm gonna be on the GCW DVD, and all you're gonna see is me with my thumb up right in front of Orange Cassidy. But anyway, the
Nice.
Gangrel worked an Orange Cassidy match because Gangrel is smart enough to know that Orange Cassidy right now is a hot item. You're not gonna make Orange Cassidy work a Gangrel match. You're gonna have Gangrel working an Orange Cassidy match. So sure shit, just like in the AEW Battle Royal that Orange Cassidy was in, Orange had his hands in his pockets. Gangrel put his hands in his tights, and they traded kicks to the calf real slow. And they did the super kick. And finally, Orange Cassidy, took his hands out and tried to wrestle and got his ass beat for a while. And the finish was Orange Cassidy took Gangrel's blood cup, and Gangrel had Orange Cassidy's orange juice. They each took a drink of their other stuff. Orange Cassidy looked like he was about to die and pass out. Gangrel spit it in Orange Cassidy's face, hit him with the inverted DDT. 1, 2, 3. Gangrel went over on Orange Cassidy. But Orange Cassidy is so over, dude. Oh, man. That guy, I don't know what they're going to do weekly with him. I hope he's not shown weekly. I hope he just kind of comes in and out. But now he's tag teaming with the best friends in AEW, so he might be featured more. I don't know how all that's going to work yet. But this dude is so damn entertaining. And I fight with so many friggin' people on Facebook about his matches being entertaining that I'm kind of sick of defending him. So Orange Cassidy is the man. Enough said.
Well, I think this is a modern spin. This is where I think that you're going to help educate some of my crowd and educate me on this stuff. Now, I can tell you this: my dad would not like Orange Cassidy.
My dad wouldn't get it either.
You know what I mean? So it's like, and that's important, I think, with wrestling, because wrestling has a traditional aspect to it, where you do kind of pay homage to the old sport, and there's certain things and ways that you tip your hat off there. Now it's okay to be innovative and new and stuff, and I think that, but that's what Orange Cassidy is. But I think that now, like, you start towing the line on the indie scenes, right? Because, like, for example, I saw one video clip where there's that move where the guy's got his legs wrapped around and he's hanging out, and the other guy's holding him up in front of him and stuff like that. He literally was using magic to stop the other guys. And I mean, again, my dad wouldn't be cool with watching that. So, but I think Orange Cassidy does have that. There's an if factor that you sometimes really can't describe. You know what I mean? Because you could have somebody else try that and they can get booed out of the building. But his demeanor is everything. Now he's got to. So now here's the question: do people travel to see this guy? Like, does he have like 15 or 20 marks that really like follow him around? Because I could see it literally going that way, especially because the crowd reactions to him seem to be like uniform, like almost like he's got like groupies and people that follow him around kind of thing. Or is it like the kind of thing where you as like a fan now, and being in the wrestling business, that if you go and mark out and yelling in the crowd and stuff like that, really the fighter will appreciate it, the promotion will appreciate it. So you become part of the show. Is that part of the appeal, where why he's so popular everywhere he goes, that he finds those people backing him? Or does he travel people? Like he could become like a fantasy character in my head. Like, yeah, I think I do want to see what he's like 3 years from now too. So we'll see. Anyway, I asked a lot there. Take it away.
For sure. I actually did watch a really good documentary on YouTube about Orange Cassidy. And he explains that, he was trying as hard as he could to be, a wrestler, and his character just wasn't taking off. And then one day he just wanted to be funny, and it just kind of took a life of its own. And as far as like traveling fans and stuff, the GCW fans, like my friend Bucky, for instance, he lives in I believe Wausau, Wisconsin. He travels to New Jersey for these shows. I mean, he traveled down to Chicago for this past one. I mean, he goes to a lot of these shows, and a lot of these GCW shows. I mean, one was literally done in a backyard with a trampoline ring. Okay, like the show was called Backyard Wrestling. Okay, let's put it that way. Um, so I mean, but they have really dedicated fans that do travel and see the GCW product itself, and
I
I think.
sense that. It's got like a feel. I don't want to liken it to something. It's nothing like the Grateful Dead and their fan base and stuff. But then again, it does have some things in common. There's a saying that very much applies to indie wrestling. If I have to explain it to you, you're not going to understand it. You know what I mean? So, and it has that kind of magic feel to it. So anyway, so and Orange Cassidy actually got pinned here. He took a loss.
Yep.
Yeah, this guy's riding high. He just signed a big contract with All Elite Wrestling. You'd think he'd get all like, well, I can't take a loss now. He goes in there and doesn't give a shit. And he takes a loss to a guy that, probably appreciated it, because he's a veteran that's out there at this point. If I'm not mistaken, and we're talking about, you know, uh, he's probably on his own kind of thing. If he hurts his hip, that he's going out of pocket for those medical expenses. So my hats off to those guys who've seen the top and keep putting in the work afterwards. You get jaded too. It's hard to go in and do the work on a lower level once you've seen the top too. So those guys deserve credit. So anyway, any final thoughts on Orange Cassidy and anything like that before we move on here?
Well, and if you really think about it, I mean, Gangrel kind of fits the mold of a game changer wrestler. I mean, he spits out blood. I mean, he doesn't necessarily have to do the death match stuff. I mean, his whole gimmick and demeanor kind of fits, the game changer mold. So, if anything, I would like to see Gangrel in GCW more often, to be completely honest with you. Like if
And
he's not.
I think that's where the companies are starting. when you start an indie show, sometimes it really is just local guys with a ring in their backyard kind of thing, and if fighting in front of 40 people, mainly family members. Um, Sometimes that picks up a little bit, and all of a sudden you got guys like Ring of Honor and things like that they've grown. They're no longer that, and Game Changer seems to be on that path. Like every match here, you could tell that this was kind of a carefully match made event. That they were worried about the content of every match, and it doesn't look like there's a lot of filler in there. In terms of, like you said, good name recognition and stuff from the business and things. Now
While
let's
you
move on
explain,
to. Go ahead.
while you explain this last match, I'm gonna grab my cord for my camera here. I'll be right back. So you introduce this match, and I'm still listening. I'll be right back.
Okay. Now, what we got here is we've got the Game Changer Wrestling's world title, and the champion right now is Nick Gage. And he defeated Effie in this fight. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I haven't seen this fight, but I think once you get to the GCW world title, now this fight is basically anything goes. You got light bulbs, you got, thumbtacks, and the whole gamut of deathmatch wrestling. Is that what the GCW world title is about? It's a true death match?
Oh yeah, I from what I've seen, oh yeah.
Okay. So to talk about Saturday, talk about I'm sorry, Friday. Talk about some of the bumps in this fight. Now, from what I've read, and I didn't see this particular fight. Now, from what I've read, GCW's had a couple of the title's been out there for a little bit, and a couple of guys that are renowned in this type of fighting have held the belt. And Gage is just the most recent guy. Gage sometimes gets criticized. It's funny. This is hilarious to me. He gets kind of criticized for being too rough. It's like, are you kidding me? And I think also what that means too is that interpreting that is that he is more of a roughhouser than a technical wrestler. Like, he doesn't seem to show a lot of the technical aspect that guys like me do appreciate. And especially in this mold when they're doing what they're doing and they sneak in legit moves and things like that. That to me is a real thrill when I see this stuff. Yeah, and it is few and far between. And then I'll let you answer this because I've got an idea of formulating here that makes the Indies look good. I think people are missing the boat. But how do you answer the critics that say, the indie wrestlers are there because doing that hardcore stuff, because anybody can hit anybody with a light bulb. They're not real wrestlers in terms of technique. And that may have been fair, years ago. That may be fair in the cases of some people, but I don't think it's fair to make that generalization across the board. But how do you answer that? Because I'm sure you've heard it.
Oh yeah, I've heard it before, and I've seen some shit death matches before, and then I've seen some really brilliant ones. It all depends on the people that are doing it and the way you layer the spots, the way you up the violence. You don't just, well, I mean, this match did start with a baseball slide into a 12 pack of light bulbs right into Nick Gage's face. But I mean, normally, normally you build up, to something even bigger and bigger and bigger, and finally to the finish. Which I mean, they did that. I'm not very familiar with Effie. Like I said, this is my first GCW show. I've just seen bits and pieces. Nick Gage, I've seen a lot of his clips. Obviously, he's probably the most popular guy in Game Changer. I mean, he's their damn champion. But when I was by the entrance, I didn't realize that the crowd piles up on him like a mosh pit. So there I was, little innocent me, all of a sudden right face to face with Nick Gage, and he's got a 12 pack of light bulbs over his shoulder. I mean, little intimidating. I've been in that world before. I was just seeing a fan just get bashed by one of these, but it didn't happen, thankfully, until he, like I just mentioned, he got a baseball slid into his face. But the Nick Gage is definitely a special human being. Um, he's a badass, and you can tell that he lays his shit in. I mean, they battled all around the arena. They battled all the way to the concessions corner. Excuse me, I got caught up in my throat there for a second. They fought over
We're a
by the
mess
merch.
here.
They fought over by the merch table. They fought back into the ring, and then Effie brought in a panel of glass, like a legit big ass panel of glass. And well, Nick Gage gave him a pile driver off the top rope through that window of glass, and that still wasn't enough to finish Effie, which was to me insane. I don't know how the hell you would top that. Well, he topped it by getting choke slammed onto the back of two chairs. So he landed and the chairs collapsed underneath the weight, which I don't know if you've ever tried to crush a chair from on top of the back step, but that's a lot of pressure coming down. And that's what got Nick Gage the 1-2-3 victory. And then it was like a giant party. Nick Gage got on the microphone once the cameras are cut and says, this shit hurts, with obviously mentioning the G-Raver injury. He said, this shit hurts, but, I'd rather do this than be miserable sitting in a factory working a 9 to 5. And, the crowd went absolutely apeshit. Like, I'm amazed, like, it wasn't like a ECW thing where they started throwing the chairs and shit in the ring. Like, that, the atmosphere after that main event, you would think that there was still another match. I mean, they were hyped. And overall, I mean, like I said on Facebook on my page, that was probably hands down one of the best shows I've ever seen live. I mean, just the mix of the lucha and the singles match. I mean, building up to the first hardcore match, and then they kind of slowed it back down, and then they were bringing it back up, and then they killed it with Nick Gage and Effie. I'm the Nick Gage Invitational. I'm gonna do a quick shout out for that. Is coming at the end of the month in Chicago again. Um, Fortunately, I can't make it because I'll be working my normal day job. But I am gonna have a couple of friends there, so hopefully I'll get an inside report from inside the Nick Gage Invitational.
Definitely well worth watching there with Nick Gage's name associated with that. And again, he retained his GCW title in by all descriptions, a brutal match over there. Like I said, it's not for the faint of heart. It's not, I think that you can fairly distinguish, WWE style wrestling from this without putting anyone down or making it seem like it's lesser because, the fact is it hasn't gone away. It's stayed and it's gotten bigger. And, that indicates to me that there's, a product there worth watching. The other interesting thing for it, I mentioned the Grateful Dead. There is actually one other correlation there. And I think that many fans, if they give it a chance, may find this to be true and not true with the WWE. And that is the connection with the athletes and the fans. You know what I mean? You're just so much more hands-on and close in those, and the athletes are actually, because they're not huge stars anymore, or yet, they're kind of more down to earth, and actually, some of those magical experiences you described probably have a lot to do with, a point in time where everything just worked out and the fans were, part of the show and creating an atmosphere. You don't get that WWE shows. WWE shows, you get a guy who leads a chant, and that may be about it. And even then, your chant may get, taken out in production from the actual show. You know what I mean? Here, you could actually becoming a part of the show seems to happen. I've seen enough videos recently. I watched a couple of Schlack fights and things like that, according to your recommendations and things. So, yeah, I think that's a big part of it. That connection with the audience stuff. That's important, because then everybody feels a connection. You have that story of, I walked in and I was there and all of a sudden I found myself face to face with the main event guy, the champion. You don't get WWE guys, who if a fan has that WWE experience, it's a completely canned experience. Like a friend of mine took his handicapped child to the WWE. So they make it a point of bringing out Roman Reigns to shake his hand and photo ops and things like that. They're terrific at that, but there's no spontaneity in that. It's like it's the spontaneity of the shows that if that's your buzz, then certainly that you're going to be able to find it there on the indie scene. That's why I've chosen to cover it here on the CRP. I'm very glad to have my guide into the indie world here in Snake Eyes. He's been doing a great job filling us in, and I think he picked the right show here for us to get our feet wet, talk about it a little bit. And every once in a while, we'll delve into the subject and talk a little bit more about indie wrestling and deathmatch wrestling and what's going on there. We'll always be on top of the AEW stuff, so you could probably check for AEW as the next subject of one of our conversations. For now, any final words, Snake Eyes?
Just get well soon, G-Raver. Hang in there, bro.
Yep. Don't forget out there, about the fighter that was injured. If you're able to help, go ahead and help. If not, support the sport, support your local indies and stuff like that. Get out there and uh, even hitting like and subscribes on YouTube helps everybody out and stuff. A lot of these companies are scratching and clawing and doing a lot of work to get noticed and stuff. And what happens when people want to get noticed? They do noticeable stuff. So a lot of it's worth watching. I'm Miguel Arati for the CRP. That's been our look at Game Changer Wrestling's August 30th show. More to come. Talk to you soon.